to First Take on this hump day halfway through the week. We're going to take you over. Max Kellerman, Stephen A. Smith, I'm Molly.
What up, big boy?
How you feeling?
How you doing?
How we doing?
I'm all right. Let's roll.
All right, let's get into it. Coming up, they might be the two best receivers in the NFL, but who is the best? Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham? Don't miss that discussion. That's coming up a little later in the show. But we start with the 88 Club. You know what it is. Dez Bryant can't wait to get back on the field after having just one catch for 8 yards in the season opener. Now, adding to that motivation, of course, is the fact that he gets a shot to redeem himself against Josh Norman on Sunday. In their last meeting in 2015, Norman held Dez to just 2 catches for 26 yards. Now, meanwhile, after signing a $75 million deal, Norman rarely covered Antonio Brown in Week 1, and the Steelers' top receiver went off for 8 catches, 126 yards, and 2 TDs, leading critics to question if he is worth the money. So with that, Stephen A., who has more on the line this Sunday, Dez or Norman?
I definitely think it's Josh Norman. I think that needs to be said. Let me be very, very clear. 5 years, $75 million, $50 million in guaranteed. I'm very happy Josh Norman got his money. I think he deserved it. This is not a question about his skill. But I can't believe that I'm saying this. It is a question about his heart, not coming from me, because I believe in Josh Norman. But I got a lot of text messages, as I was telling you yesterday when I was in the nation's capital, because I was at the game Monday Night Football, right on the sidelines, hollering at people after the game, getting a lot of text messages from present and former players. And a lot of people were saying, you're Josh Norman, you got to ask for that assignment. It can't be about, okay, I play the left side of the field, and whoever comes over to my side, that's the side I'm playing. Now, in defense of Josh Norman is quick to say, hey, I play for the Redskins. They signed me to this money. I'm not trying to be a distraction. If Jay Gruden and Joe Barry, the defensive coordinator, if this is what they want me to do, I'm going to do this. You also have to take into account the fact that there are people who say, well, you got to remember the kind of changes that take place, what it ultimately enforces. Because if you have a guy like I was speaking to Keyshawn Johnson yesterday, who's about to get his own morning show on ESPN LA radio, your former house, your former home, okay? And mine, too, to some degree. But here's the deal. Keyshawn Johnson was pointing this out, and he made the point that if you move Josh Norman, then you've got to move Breland, and you've got to move somebody playing the nickel, and you've got to put people in foreign territory that they may not be equipped to handle. We understand all of that. But here's the problem. Josh Norman is not just an elite corner in this game. He's an elite trash talker. He's somebody that has grown to be very elite at bringing the attention to himself. So nobody wants to hear all of that, and then come prime time, all of a sudden you in the dark because the coach got you on the left side of the field, and that's where you're confined to, and offensive coordinators and head coaches like Mike Tomlin get to evolve their offense away from you. You can't do that. Somehow, some way, Josh Norman is going to have to step up and be a more active participant in the Redskins. He's going to have to do what D'Angelo Hall did years ago when he said, excuse me, hell with all of that. I'm tired of all these zone schemes and all of this other stuff. I'm the best corner on this team. I'm taking that assignment. I'm not going to sit up here and just stand on one side of the field and be out of the action. I'm not blaming Josh Norman for what transpired Monday. I believe him when he says what he says, and I think everybody should. But the reality is a lot of cats don't. I have had Hall of Fame receivers, Hall of Fame corners, and guys that are playing in the NFL text me in the last 36 hours saying, quote, Josh Norman didn't want that assignment Monday night against Antonio Brown on Monday Night Football, his first game in a Redskins uniform, nationally televised. I don't believe that. I told him, hell no. I ain't trying to hear that about Josh Norman. But they were emphatic about their statements that Josh Norman wanted no parts of Antonio Brown. You can't do that this week against Dez Bryant. When you were acquired by the Redskins, we were all looking forward. What's the first thing you said, Max? 2 games against Dez Bryant, 2 games against Odell Beckham Jr. Could you imagine, based on your statement, if you're sitting here mid-season and Josh Norman has had a grand total of 3 or 4 plays against the both of them because they didn't line up on where he was at the left side of the field or the right side of the offensive line? You can't have that. He's the big man on campus, per se. You got to sit up there and demand that you take that assignment. And this Sunday against Dez Bryant is where he should begin doing that.
Okay. I'm going to address what you just said about Josh Norman in a second. I want to start with Dez Bryant. It's more important for Dez Bryant. This is a bigger matchup for Dez. Dez is coming off a down year. Now, he didn't have his quarterback, and he was banged up, but it was a down year for Dez Bryant. To the point that when I used to tell everyone how great Odell Beckham Jr. is, how he's qualitatively different than the other wideouts, and that his main competition is actually Antonio Brown, not Dez Bryant. Boy, I used to hear it. Dez is the best. That Dez is the best choir, that chorus, has quieted down. Nowadays, I hear Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones went on the field, and A.J. Green's getting more love now. It's obviously very early in the season, but he deserves it. And the Dez crowd is much quieter based on last season. Now, you start this season with Dak Prescott. Again, you don't have Tony Romo. But you've been raving about Dak Prescott in the preseason. And Dak Prescott's hooked up with you in the preseason. He's looked good throwing the ball deep. And then you come up against a good Giant secondary. I said the other day, best in the NFL. I should have said NFC. But I do think when you look at not the secondary, but the corners on the Giants.
Okay.
You know, Janoris Jenkins, Dominic Rodgers, Cromartie, and Eli Apple. Find me 3 better corners on the same team. And they shut him down. Dak Prescott and Dez Bryant wasn't a thing. 1 catch for 9 yards. 1 catch for 9 yards, 8 yards maybe. Coming off of a season where it was a down year for you. You are an elite receiver, or until very recently, always mentioned. There was no conversation of the best in the business that did not include Dez Bryant's name. All of a sudden, his name isn't included. You have to ball, particularly against another divisional rival when you're down 0-1 on the season.
I completely disagree with you. And here's why I disagree with you. Number one, you have a rookie quarterback who's still learning. All right, this past weekend was his first game in the NFL. He's not looking to throw outside the numbers. 14 times he targeted Cole Beasley. 12 times he targeted Jason Witten. He was throwing in between the seams, This is what in between the numbers, rather.
That's got to get open.
I'm just saying, but we don't know whether he was open or not, because we don't know if that was the game plan on the part of Jason Garrett and Chan Gilly, because he was a rookie quarterback. So in other words, if you're Dez Bryant, you have cover. I would totally agree with you if Tony Romo was the one behind center and you're fresh off a 1 reception for 8 yards performance. There's no question you would be absolutely right, particularly when you take into account Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham Jr., A.J. Green, for example, all of these other guys. You would have a point. But the fact that you have a rookie quarterback, I think, gives you some cover if you're Dez Bryant. Here's why Josh Norman has no cover. Not only did Josh Norman get the dollars, not only is he one of the premier corners in the game, easily top 5, he believes number 1, but he has told us so. And he has talked about looking forward to going up against these guys in the conference. I want to address that. So if you say that that's what you want and that's what you're looking forward to, and now you've been given the money and the figurative cachet to pull that off, it can't be, all right, he's not on my side of the field. So that's unacceptable.
I've made the pro-Dez argument in the sense that he has more to prove than Josh Norman.
Sure.
I now want to attack your Josh Norman.
Sure.
Josh Norman's competitive spirit, I think it's absurd to question that. Because athletically, I don't think he's what some of the elite corners are. That's why he's not really considered a cover guy. However, competitively, he's so competitive. He got in Odell Beckham Jr.'s head last year. Odell burnt him all over the field. But you know what he did? He was so in his head, Odell dropped the only 2 passes in his career. 1 for a touchdown. And wound up getting himself suspended a game. That's how competitive. He's like a Cortland Finnegan, but you know, obviously higher paid and higher profile. He's that kind of competitor. The fact is, if they're lining up avoiding you, you've done your job. You know how they never threw to Deion Sanders' side of the field, and obviously he's no Deion Sanders. But if they're looking to avoid the Antonio Brown matchup with you in a certain now that's one. Hold on.
Go ahead.
Hold on. I'm not
go ahead, because you done messed up.
Go
ahead.
Because remember what the whole thing with Norman was before the season. He's going to do a TV show during the season. People are mad. Ownership. Is this the right move? Did they bring in a guy who's going to cause a problem? All this stuff about Josh Norman not demanding things before the game is him being a good soldier. He's there saying, look, I have total faith in my coaching staff. I am here to do my job. They do their job. I'm not going to second guess it week 1. Right. He's being a good soldier, which is what everyone wanted to see from him in the preseason coming in. And on top of that, essentially doing his job by them avoiding their top receiver
But you're not
from on his side of the
But
field.
once again, you're not. It's not that you're wrong. It's that you're incomplete. You're making valid points about Josh Norman in terms of his competitive fervor. Nobody should ever question that about Josh Norman. I think it's absolutely idiotic for anybody to think that he's scared of somebody or he's non-competitive and he's scared to go at somebody. I don't think that's the case at all. I completely believe him when he's talking about things schematically and how the Redskins decided to do what they did. Where you messed up was when you brought up prime time. Let's understand something about prime time. If Max was number one, prime time's on you. And by the way, if then all of a sudden Molly's catching for 200 yards, prime time gonna switch on her. It don't matter.
You're comparing him to the greatest who ever did it.
I'm not
Deion Sanders is the best ever.
You're not hearing my point. I'm not comparing. I'm simply saying you should have never brought him up. That was your mistake. So you were the one that compared. I'm telling you what you're absolutely right with what you just said, but you were wrong to bring him up to begin with. Hold on. I'm saying to you, if you're Josh Norman and you're getting this kind of money, understand what people are saying when they're throwing you under the bus.
You worried about what people are saying, or you worried about the results on the field?
Look, man. Of course we're worried about what people are saying. We the ones talking. Don't we want people to be worried about what we're saying?
Yeah,
of course you do.
But if you're Josh Norman, are you worried about what people are saying, or are you worried about how they're playing?
Because you know why you're worried about what people are saying? Because you talking and people listening to you is what got you your money.
Right.
So in other words,
and so now you're doing what the coaches want you to do.
No. You're doing what the coaches want you to do, but it was in the midst of Antonio Brown schooling y'all. Now, if there was nobody, if 9 different receivers were being effective and Big Ben Roethlisberger was spreading the ball all over the place, you'd have a point. Marcus Wheaton was out. Heath Miller just retired. Ladarius Green was out. Martavis Bryant couldn't stay off the weed, so he's out for the damn year. Le'Veon Bell, who's not only a runner but a pass catcher, out of the backfield, was out. Everybody and their grandmother knew Antonio Brown's going to get the ball. And you have Breeland on him?
They like Breeland in the preseason.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Listen.
They like Breeland. I think he's a solid corner.
I'm not saying, yes.
And by the way, only because of Antonio Brown's greatness did Breeland not have a pick. Antonio Brown caught a touchdown that he took out of Breeland's hands because Antonio Brown is on another planet, not because Breeland can't
Max
cover.
Kellerman, you just brought up that Breeland is solid.
Yeah.
But you're the Redskins. You went out and paid $75 million, $50 million in guaranteed. That wasn't for solid. That was for somebody you labeled great. And you would have him on the opposite side, away from the best receiver in football. Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense to you? Answer that question.
No, from the coaching staff's point of view, no. I would have put Josh Norman.
That's what we're saying.
But that's not Josh Norman's not the coach.
I understand that. But what I'm saying to you is that if you've got guys who played the position, who were elite at the position, who are saying that Josh Norman should have asked for the assignment because you got a teammate in D'Angelo Hall who is no longer a cornerback because he understands Father Time and sort of creeped up on him a little bit. So he switched to the free safety position. Still good. What did he do? D'Angelo Hall in the past would sit there and say, I'm the best. I'm not listening to y'all. Give me the assignment. That's what I'm saying.
Because Hall of Famer receiver, whoever's calling it receiver.
It wasn't just one. It was several.
Perceived that he didn't make enough noise. He didn't show that he was champing at the bit and ready to go at Antonio Brown.
What he was saying
somehow that's a deficiency. How about the fact that he is being a good soldier and being used schematically, whether he agrees with it or not, the way that coaches want?
He deserves to be applauded for his professionalism. Congratulations. Yeah. But this was while the best receiver in football was flat out waxing your team and your teammates. So when you look at it,
so blame the coaches. What you blaming him for?
No, I'm not blaming him. I said the question for the subject matter, Max, wasn't is he to blame for the Redskins on Monday night? The question was, who has a lot at stake this Sunday because Des Bryant is coming into the house. And now for the second consecutive week, you can't sit on the left side and say, well, that's not my responsibility. You might have to step up and say, look, damn it, Breeland, I love you, but you ain't handling business. Let's switch. Yeah. You might have to do that.
So
you just might.
Going into the season, we knew that Norman is not a classic cover corner. Everyone who's come on the show has
By the way, Norman denies that.
Right. Fine.
He believes.
Because he has pride.
But he believes.
You just said his competitive drive is
but
what
he
makes
he believes he's a cover guy, too.
Okay, fine. He may also believe in doing what the coaches say because he's trying to be a good soldier. So sometimes he has to believe something, sometimes not. Let him believe what he believes. But he's not a classic cover corner, according to everyone who watches him, in the way that some of the other guys like Revis was at his best or someone like that. But he's a very, very good player. And coming into the season, did we expect him to always always draw the top assignment and act as though he is a cover corner, or is he going to be used schematically a little different, more like he was used to great success, before he ever got to Washington?
Here's my direct answer to that. When you have what is perceived to be an elite corner on your squad, any opposing offense coming into a stadium should know that we have to deal with this guy because this guy is going to be responsible for trying to negate our #1 offensive weapon. That's what it's supposed to be.
Tim Hasselbeck was on the show yesterday addressing this. If you're Josh Norman and you are going to abide by what the coaches want, not second guess, not cause a problem after week 1 in a franchise where sometimes these kind of problems come up. He has a TV show. He says, no, I'm not a distraction. I'm a team player. What is it exactly you want him to do? You want him to do more than his job? Because the proof in the pudding, as Tim Hasselbeck said, is they were avoiding his side of the field. They were lining Antonio Brown up on the opposite side of the field. As a player, that's all you can be responsible for.
And I'm saying to
your assignment.
And I'm saying to you, that's fine for Monday night. I understand. But with Des Bryant and the Dallas Cowboys coming in, with you on the record quoted as saying you're looking forward to going against Des Bryant and Odell Beckham Jr., let me ask you a question. If Josh Norman does the same thing and the Giants line Odell Beckham Jr. on the opposite side of the field with their history, is Max Kellerman going to sit here and look me in the face and go like this? I don't have a problem with Josh Norman being on the opposite side of the field as Odell Beckham Jr.
No, I will say this. The coaching staff knows what it's doing because Odell burnt him all over the field last year. And first of all, there's almost no one who can cover one-on-one any of these top receivers.
I'm not asking you. Listen,
Secondly,
I'm not asking you that. Don't try to change it. You think you're being slick. That's not what I asked you. I know that Odell Beckham Jr. pretty much got the best of him. I know how electrifying Odell Beckham Jr. is. That is not my question, Max Kellerman. What I asked you is specific, and I do believe that I speak fluent English. I asked you a direct question.
Go ahead.
If you saw Josh Norman lined up on the opposite side of the field than Odell Beckham Jr. with their history, would you or would you not have a problem with it?
I would be disappointed as a fan. But as someone watching a football game, it could have legitimate reasons for that. And also, Breland is like you're acting like Breland is
no, I'm not. I'm saying Josh Norman is the man. If Josh Norman seemed content on being on the left side and was making no noise whatsoever, just as peace and tranquil as you could possibly be, not minding at all if Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't even in the vicinity, you trying to tell me that would be acceptable to you?
Yes.
That's a lie.
Yes.
You're lying. I wish I had a cup of water. I'd throw it on you. That's a lie. You're lying.
You can sign a baseball player, and the idea is he's going to hit in the middle of the lineup, and the manager can decide, no, I want to lead him off. That's how he used it.
But it didn't work this last week.
I appreciate that baseball analogy. Last point. I want to go there. Barry Bonds rolls up to the plate. I'm Roger Clemens. I'm Randy Johnson. I'm any of these dudes. Studs. You understand what I'm saying to you? I'm Kershaw. I'm Bumgarner.
Walk him. 4 pitches.
Excuse me.
4 pitches.
I'm going to sit up there and let a manager. I'm a stud now. I'm a Cy Young Award winner. I'm a future Hall of Famer. I'm elite. I brought up elite pitchers in MLB history. I'm going to sit up there and walk them intentionally. You know what?
They did.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
That's a lie.
Hold on.
That's a lie. Not the elite pitchers. Not the elite pitchers. That's a lie.
The year that Barry Bonds had a 600 on-base percentage.
That's right.
Which is unheard of when he looked totally juiced out of his mind.
Don't go into one of your philosophical soliloquies. Who walked them?
That year, I would have to go back.
That's right, because you ain't going to find it.
But I can tell you.
The elite pitchers?
Dave Sabino will look this up right now.
The elite pitchers, Max, you're going to lie on national television.
Into the game used to be from some managers, no pitches to Barry Bonds.
David Sabino, he's going to look it up right now. That's an elite pitcher.
Yes.
I said elite.
Yes.
I didn't say average.
Yes.
I said elite.
Right.
I'm trying to tell you a manager.
If I were the manager.
No, that's not what I asked.
I would say you walk that man.
No. Once again, you don't get to change the narrative. I said to you, the elite pitches. In the game of baseball, when you got that kind of challenge, a manager wouldn't even think to go up to them to tell them to walk them. It's a lie. It's a lie. I gotta see it to believe it. Not a ton of them. Listen, you, the encyclopedic mind that you have, you would have known it off the top. As much as you love baseball, that's why I know you're lying. Because I know you would know.
You know why I can't off the top of my head? What? Because it was so routine for managers to walk Bonds every time he came to the plate.
Not the elite. Not the elite.
Everybody.
Not the elite.
He drove over 200 walks.
No. We'll get the facts.
Not the elite.
We're going to look it up.
Not the elite. I got to see it to believe it. I promise you.
We'll come back to it.
Oh, please. Boy, where's my boy Jeff Brown when I need him? Where's my man Jeff Brown when I need him? I know Jeff would know this off the top. An elite pitcher walked Barry Bonds. That's a lie. They would never die. They'd look at a manager like, are you smoking something?
Could look at him.
So back to our conversation. The question remains, will Norman cover Dez? That remains to be seen.
He's got to.
At times, he has to cover Dez Bryant, although he may not need to the way Dez.
At times.
The way
Dez. The guys talk about one of the top receivers in the NFL. Stephen A. is getting annoyed. I know the annoyed voice, but later in the show, the guys will discuss maybe the two best receivers in football. Who would you rather have on your team, Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham? Right now, go on the First Take Twitter page and vote. Friday, it's going to be good. Don't miss the show when Terry Crews stops by. We'll ask him about his new season of Brooklyn Nine-Nine and his playing days with the LA Rams. Why are you making this
Molly.
face? What?
Cameraman just comes up to me. Shows me on his phone.
Yeah.
Would you say Greg Maddux was an elite pitcher?
Oh, here we go.
Not at that time.
Well, which time? Because he intentionally walked Bonds 9 times.
Wait a minute.
Was Kurt Schilling an elite pitcher?
Yes, he was.
Intentionally walked them 8 times. Was John Smoltz an elite pitcher?
It's okay, Stephen A. I see that face.
I gotta look this up. No. Here's how he blinded me. Here's how he blindsided me. Good help from the cameraman. I'll get you for this too. Make sure I'll find him.
You just got sucker punched.
No, I got sucker punched. It's okay. But here's the deal. How old were they at the time, and where were they at in their career?
Which time? They walked them so much. Who knows?
That's good. Y'all got me here. I said Randy Johnson. I mentioned names like that, Roger Clemens, Randy Johnson, guys like that. But Greg Maddux.
Schilling and Maddux.
Schilling, true, because Schilling.
Smoltz.
Yeah, I got, you know what? Smoltz, you got me.
Smoltz is
I love
bad man.
Smoltz was a bad man. I didn't know that.
Not to mention,
I did not know that. Can you concede Max just won that debate?
No, because he had, hold on, let me tell you why. Because he had help from the cameraman. And what I'm saying is, I'm sitting here naked on the air. I haven't had an opportunity, to do my research. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I might concede.
That smile tells me everything I need.
Me too, exactly.
Let's get back to it tomorrow.
I know too well.
We'll revisit.
I read that face.
No, I promise you.
I
promise you, when I have time to research it, if I am wrong, I will come on the air tomorrow and acknowledge Max got me. I refuse to believe. I refuse. I'm double checking those stats, and I'm going to go to the pictures that I was talking about. But that's okay. That's all right. Go ahead. But now I got it.
We'll give you another day to admit it.
No. Max, Maddux, Glavin, Smoltz.
No, Max Schilling Smoltz.
Okay. All right.
It's okay. You got owned, and so did Revis Island.
I've never been owned. I've never been owned.
A.J. Green.
And I refuse to concede that.
Owning Durrell, going off for 180 yards and a score, and now his former coach Rex Ryan is defending his former cornerback with the Jets, Darrelle Revis. Here's Rex on if Revis is slipping.
Everybody's, hey, they're going to be down on Revis because he had like a poor game or whatever. I mean, that receiver there at Cincinnati is pretty darn good, and if you're locked up man coverage with anybody, then it's a tough situation. The thing about Revis is, if he slipped at all as a player, he's coming down from the very tip of Everest. That's where he'd be coming down from. So how far down, I'm not sure. But I know one thing, I know the kind of player he is.
Stephen A. just a moment ago slipping from Everest. Max, is Revis done?
Yeah. Darrelle Revis is done. Now, as a football player, no. But Darrelle Revis that we all knew and loved is gone forever, never to return. And he was damn good last year. But then there were whispers in the offseason, the preseason, is he still going to be? And look, Darrelle Revis that we knew and loved, I don't care who he's playing. I don't care what rules you want to use. I know, many have made the point. You can't touch the receiver. You can't touch the quarterback. Every rule favors the passing game, etc. But in man coverage, he's going to get burned 8 for 8 for over 100, well over 100 yards and a touchdown. Is that the Darrelle Revis you remember? It's not the Darrelle Revis I remember. Darrelle Revis Island is like the lost city of Atlantis right now. Underwater, gone. Now, Could he still be a really good free safety? Yeah. Could he have use as a corner? Yes, but that's not what we're talking about when we say Darrelle Revis. Best cover corner I've ever seen, best corner I've ever seen was Deion Sanders. To me, it's not close. The second best I've seen with my own eyes, Darrelle Revis. So other than Deion Sanders, that's the best I've seen. And that guy would never get burnt 8 for 8 over 100 yards and a touchdown. It's just not the same guy anymore. I warned people about Kobe Bryant, Peyton Manning, Derek Jeter. They're gone. That's not the same guy anymore. It looks like the same guy, but it's the remains of those players. I'm telling you now, Tom Brady, by the middle of next year, it's going to be the remains of Tom Brady. This is what happens. Darrelle Revis right now, it's the remains of Darrelle Revis. Now, as Coach Ryan just said, he's descending from such heights that even the remains of Darrelle Revis, you move him around a little bit, you figure out what he can do. He can play in the NFL. He can have value, especially, I think, at free safety. But the cornerback that we all knew and loved, Stephen A., that's something in the past.
I'm not going to close the door on Darrelle Revis just yet, because I've seen plenty of times throughout history, no matter what the sport is, where the guys with incredible ability, complemented by a cerebral approach to the game, that's very impressive, are individuals you cannot count out. And I think Darrelle Revis is one of those people. Keep in mind that he's the kind of person that mans up. He plays his man. Keep in mind, we're talking about an A.J. Green who is an elite receiver, who's about 6'4", 6'5". So he's got considerable height over Darrelle Revis. Now, 10 receptions for 150 yards of the 180 yards that Green ultimately had on this afternoon. That's not something we've ever seen happen to Darrelle Revis. But I think that Darrelle Revis is the kind of individual capable of coming back from it. Let's also take into account the fact that the Jets' defense isn't exactly the same. As we look at these guys right now, you've got on your defensive line, you've got a Leonard Williams, some dude, Lawrence Thomas. We ain't seen him before. McClendon and somebody we know, Muhammad Wilkerson, obviously is a stud, very deserving of the $86 million contract extension he ultimately received. Catapano, don't know about him. David Harris, yeah, I can rely on. Aaron Henderson, don't know about him. Buster Screen, he was in the nickel last year, in the slot, defending slot receivers. Now he's your corner because Antonio Cromartie is gone. So even though Revis mans up, and we can respect that, you have to understand things are looking a bit differently, and so there's an adjustment. It's week 1. If this were week 8, week 10, week 12, that would be different to me. But the fact that it was week 1, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it. I'm going to be anxious to see how Darrelle Revis is going to respond in the weeks to come. You know, obviously that knee surgery he had a couple of years ago, he came back from that. He played well last year, okay? And when you look at it from that perspective, you have to assume that he's still capable of doing great things this year. Week 1. When you're still a bit rusty, when you're getting your bearings under you, when practice ain't what it used to be because of the collective bargaining agreement limiting what you can do, when the preseason action ain't what it used to be for the same reason. In the first game you come into, you got to go up against A.J. Green. These kind of things could potentially happen. I just think that he's done too much over the course of his illustrious career, and he's shown too much of an arsenal for me to sleep on him. If his game was just predicated on his athleticism, Max, that would be different. But because so many things, so many intangibles contribute to the greatness that he has exhibited throughout his career, especially during the 2009 season, which was the best that we may have ever seen from a cornerback, I'm just not ready to close the door on Revis just yet in terms of being Revis. I know you say he can play. I know you say he could be in the NFL, but I'm talking about Revis being Revis. I still think the jury is out. I don't mind acknowledging there's trepidation, but I'm not ready to close the door on him.
I want to say something about that. A lot of times, players especially, because they have so much pride, and that's one of the things, maybe the main ingredient into what makes them great. When I or others say something like that guy is done, they take it as an insult to them. As when they're active, they should, because they use it as motivation and they're so competitive. What are they doing out on the field if they don't think they can still get the job done? Yep. In fact, I see it differently. I see it as being a protector of their legacy. Sometimes I
agree with you.
Yeah, Roy Jones once got mad at me for this because the way it came out, he really didn't like. But I wanted to make everybody clear that the Roy they saw at a certain point was no longer the other guy, because the other guy, the great Roy Jones, I didn't want him to get confused with the later version.
I totally agree.
And then kids be like, oh, he wasn't so good.
No argument there.
What are you talking about? Same thing with Kobe, same thing with Peyton, same thing with all these, same thing with Derek Jeter. That's not the same dude. It's amazing he can still play in a very athletic position like corner after doing it for a lot of years. But I just want to make very clear for people watching that a Darrelle Revis, who even gets back to being, oh, he's a top 10 corner. Top 10 corner is not Darrelle. I mean, I don't think he will. I think he really needs pretty soon a position change. But Darrelle was something different.
Yeah, he was something different. But here's the thing, Max. We just finished talking about Josh Norman a little while ago. One of the things we're talking about is this is a guy that's considered top 5, that's primarily playing one side, and benefits from zone schemes as well as anything else. So what I'm saying is, because of the way the game has changed and the requirements placed on the shoulders of cornerbacks in today's game, where it ain't just about guard your man, lock him down, and now it's about schemes, now it's about zones, now it's about areas. What I'm saying to you is that we might see a Darrelle Revis that implements that into the grand scheme of things as he has in the past,
You know what I was saying?
coupled with the rest of what he has at his disposal, which would then put him right back in that elite conversation with the Shermans, Petersons, Normans, and others. Because we used to be talking about Joe Hayden, and then he got injured, slipped off a little bit, and now everybody's waiting to see what he's going to do. I love my man Joe, wishing him nothing but the best. Got love for him. But I'm saying we got to think about Revis from that perspective. I don't know if we can judge him the way we used to because of how the game has evolved.
Okay, that is a good point, and I would say this. That's no longer Revis. Now, you could say he's evolved into something else elite. That's a mean trick. It's a neat trick if he can pull it off. I don't think you can just assume that he pulls it off. If he pulls it off, I'll step back and say, well, he proved me wrong. But there are guys like, for example, Sean Kemp, who turned in, not that he remained elite, but he turned into a different kind of player, kind of big man.
Sean Clump. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
But a big man in the middle who still stayed in the league as a. But if you were to watch a late Sean Kemp play in the post, and you had to Hercules,
Go ahead.
and you had to explain to someone who hadn't seen him who that was, that's not the same guy. It's just a fundamentally different guy.
And I'm saying to you, you could say that about Revis based off of this Sunday. Let's see if that happens again. I find it hard to believe it will. I really do.
We shall see. Coming up next. Meanwhile, African Americans comprise 68% of the player population in the NFL and 74%, in the NBA. That number is just 8% in baseball, with only 69 African Americans on the opening day rosters and disabled list this season. Orioles center fielder Adam Jones highlighted that point to USA Today Sports when responding to criticism that Major League Baseball's lack of a Colin Kaepernick-like protest is because, quote, baseball is a white man's sport. Joins SportsCenter to further those comments.
You look around in baseball, and if you see what you see, and I don't know whose eyes, other people, what they see, but through my eyes, I see the majority of white players, and it's not a problem. It's not like I'm saying, oh, we need more black players, we need to do this and do that. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, he asked me a question, and I answered it simply as that, and with the backing of it, knowing that the numbers backed up my statement. And like I said, we play in such a numbers game, sabermetrics. Everything is always valued by numbers these days. So why, when I threw out a number, did I get backlash from it? I'm just speaking the truth.
So Stephen A. Jones saying he's basing his point there on facts. Does he have a point?
He absolutely does. Adam Jones is 1,000% right, and let me say that I stand in complete concert with everything that he said, and I applaud his willingness to say it because he speaks the truth. He's a highly intelligent brother. I'm very, very proud of him. Not to mention the fact that he's not a scrub. He's batting like 280. He's got about 27 home runs. This is not some dude riding the bench that's just opening his mouth. Adam Jones can play the game of baseball. And so let's analyze what he had to say. Who can refute what he's saying? 8% of Major League Baseball is African American. Now, let's be clear. That's not entirely Major League Baseball's fault. Is there more that they can do? Certainly so. They have their RBI program, which is called Reviving Baseball in the Inner City, and they've made a concerted effort. And some of the white ball players in Major League Baseball, like Mark Teixeira, he comes to mind, have put forth tremendous efforts in helping their cause in that regard, and they're to be applauded for it. But far more often than not, Major League Baseball's desire is to go to other countries, the Dominican, Venezuela, and others. You might get individuals with a darker pigmentation, but they're black Latinos, for example, for lack of a better...
Afro-Caribbean.
They're Afro-Caribbean. You could look at it that way. That's what they elect to go through. Understand that those individuals are not going to challenge the very fabric of America and what it's all about. They're coming from impoverished backgrounds. I don't want to call it a third world country. Maybe you could speak to that better than me.
Developing nation.
But developing nations. They get over to the United States of America. All they're looking to do is play baseball, make some money, give some money back to their family in their respective countries, etc., and go on from there. If you are an African American, you're isolated in the sport of Major League Baseball. And when he says that it's a white sport, and that's why you're not seeing anybody stand up, that's absolutely true. Now, some people would sit there and say, well, it's wrong. Well, we have to debate that too, because if you are a white individual and you don't understand nor comprehend the plight of African Americans in this country from a detailed perspective, you're not going to be gung-ho about standing up and stepping up and saying, I want to join them in this fight that I have very little comprehension about. But we also have to take into account the fact that Major League Baseball is incredibly insulated. They are about doing things their way. And I'm not talking about the sport from a governing position. I'm talking about the players, the tradition, the culture, and what they try to enforce upon individuals that come into the sport. We have several incidences in the world of sports that we have pointed to, Max, over the last 2 or 3 years alone, where white players have stepped up. Whether it's the Hispanic player from that used to be in Milwaukee and then was in Houston, I forgot his name, but he was very rambunctious and very demonstrative and bombastic. I think so. I think it was Carlos Gomez. That's right. When one of the players had a problem with him running around the bases.
McCann?
Yeah, I think
Brian
it was
McCann when he was in Atlanta.
Exactly. That was Brian McCann, but there was another incident when he was in Houston. I just forget the details. My point is that there were players that were saying, there's a way you're supposed to conduct yourself if you're going to be here. There's a certain way that we do things in this sport, and that is the way that it is going to be. And baseball, more than any other sport in America, makes it very, very clear that there's a specific level of decorum they mandate that you display and exercise if you're going to be accepted and embraced by this culture. That is not going to be the same people that's going to turn around and jump up in arms and lock arms like the Seattle Seahawks did, or some members with Kansas City did, and others, or kneel down for the national anthem and express empathy and sympathy and sensitivity for Colin Kaepernick and what he's brought attention to. It's just not going to happen. So Adam Jones' willingness to point that out is something that I appreciate, because it also highlights why baseball is sort of lagging behind. If you see the growing audience in the NBA, growing audience in the NFL, baseball has its numbers, but its audience is relatively the same. They sort of alienated themselves from a younger generation. And this is one of the reasons why, which is what Adam Jones pointed to.
There is so much here to unpack. Let me start with what I referenced the other day. Josh Marshall of Talking Points Memo has been tweeting about it. The idea of this multiracial coalition in this country, which has become maybe the dominant social political force, which is one of the reasons that in this climate, the NFL, I think, is reacting well to the protests. And in fact, even there's a national election going on that's a referendum on this multiracial coalition moving forward versus, essentially, if you look at likely voters, older white people who want to maintain the status quo, mainly because they're angry and have enjoyed the status quo, and the world is changing. So like, that's the context in which we're talking about all of this. Baseball, before we get to Adam Jones, who is not only an excellent player for a number of years, but embodies the right way to play the game, according to the baseball ethos. You know, this guy is it has that kind of puritanical, hardworking, old school baseball humility and work ethic everyone loves. I would say one of the reasons you don't have a lot of African-American players in baseball is baseball, I grew up with it. I love it. It's a cultural loving of baseball. But I admit, it's not as entertaining as basketball or football. I wish soccer fans would admit the same thing about soccer. You know, like you grew up with it, I get it, you love it. It's not as good a product as basketball or football. So kids are more attracted generally. The audience is younger for basketball and football. But also, sport is used in this country for upward social mobility. I mean, if you're from the inner city and you can play, it can lift you out of poverty. And the returns on investment in basketball and football are much more predictable than in baseball. In other words, baseball is so mechanical, you can be an elite athlete. It's hard to say if you're going to make the major leagues. That's years away. But if you're elite in basketball or football, you have a better idea of how much of an impact you can have in those sports. The returns on your investment in those sports as an athlete are more predictable. And so that also funnels people of color who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds to those sports. So, you know, just getting into a little bit the reasons for why African-American participation in the major league level has dropped from the mid-70s, where it was almost 30%, to now under 10%. There are various reasons for that. And is it safe to assume that given that context, there will be less protest from people of color or people protesting issues that affect people of color in baseball than there is in basketball and football? Of course. Everything he said is absolutely true on its face.
Let me say this to you. And I don't know if anybody has ever said this to describe baseball. I don't know anybody that loves baseball more than my father. My father was from the West Indies, St. Thomas Virgin Islands. He was somebody that was drafted by the Giants in the 50s, but he and my mother got married, and obviously back then the money that you can make now, you couldn't make that money back then, so he had to go out there and earn an honest living, and as a result, you know, that his baseball career had to take a back seat. My father loves baseball. My father and I have debated this on many, many occasions, and I'll say it right now on national television. Sports is supposed to be the closest thing to a meritocracy, but when it comes to the sport of baseball, particularly as it pertains to the African-American community, it's viewed to some degree as too political. There's too much of a process to go through, and black folks are not prone to trust it the way they trust basketball, the way they trust football. Because see, what happens is with basketball, now you got to play 1 year before you go to the NBA, but you can go and get the riches relatively quickly. Football, yes, you got to go to football for 2 to 3 years. You know, it's college football, but college football is so big time. The notoriety that comes with it, it breeds a level of merit that you can believe and attach yourself to. So you look at that as a meritocracy to some degree, and it's believable. Whereas in the case of baseball, you could be a stud on a high school level, still got to go to minors. Chances are single A, double A, triple A, you know, we got to go through this, and then you got to hope that you fit on a team, and, you know, all of this other stuff. And I'm saying, I'm not addressing the veracity of it, because I understand there's nuances, but the impression to those within the African-American community is that it requires an elevated level of trust in the system than the other sports do, and black folks ain't gonna do that.
The way I would say,
they're just not gonna do that.
It's a more mechanical sport that you cannot impose your physical gifts on as much, and therefore it's harder to predict who will actually wind up good. And so the return of investment, as I said, not being as predictable, might as well go into the other sports, especially since they're more fun to watch and play. Lastly, I just want to say that we're talking about the culture of baseball also, the kind of no fun stuff in baseball. There's a certain way of doing things. And the reason I bring up this election year being a referendum on cultural changes in the United States, the multiracial coalition, you know, versus the kind of older conservative white coalition, is because that same thing has been being played out in baseball in recent years. There's a way to play the game. Yes, once upon a time that was true, but it is changing as other cultures come into the game, particularly Latin American cultures, etc. And a lot of what we see conflict on the baseball field when someone gets thrown at, or like McCann had a problem with, what is essentially that clash of cultures. Wait a minute. There's a way I was brought up playing this game. Yes, but hold on a second. That way can be changing, and it reflects changes in our broader society.
But remember what you're saying. You're talking about the clash of cultures. Here's the problem with the clash. Black folks don't have a problem with the clash. Black folks know how to be confrontational. It's not really a problem for us, okay? The problem lies where...
Well, certainly not for you.
And never will be.
Not for me either.
But here's the deal. There we go.
Right.
But the fact is that even though there's a clash of cultures, there's still this feeling of inequity. Because what happens is, even though it's a clash of cultures, the culture that has been existing even since 1918, when you had a former Navy, a Navy soldier stand and salute during the national anthem while standing at third base in 1918, and the crowd stood in unison and they got all enthusiastic. And 12 years later, it was
they found out they could make some money doing this.
They could make some money doing it. But the point is that clash of cultures, there's still an inequity because the culture that exists wants to squash the new culture from being on the come up. And that's where you have a problem.
Of course.
And black folks are convinced that they will lose that battle when it comes to the sport of baseball. So why bother?
Especially when it's not as fun to play. It's harder to predict if you can make money.
When there are options.
Of course.
We will leave it there. When we come back, Jimmy G leads the Pats to a huge road win in Week 1, but is it big enough to vault the Pats into the #1 spot on the ESPN.com Power Rankings? Find out that next. New #1 team in the Week 2 Power Rankings, the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers, that bad man, and company move up 5 spots from #6 after a win in Jacksonville to open the season. So, as you can see, the top 10 of the Week 2 Power Rankings. And now we welcome in Jeff Saturdays here with us. Hey, how we doing?
So good.
We need to get your thoughts on these Power Rankings after Week 2 here, Jeff. Break this down for us. Should the Packers be #1? Aggressive?
No, very aggressive. From 6 to 1, you play the Jacksonville Jaguars without Chris Ivory, who's in the hospital and goes on Sunday, right? So without a predominantly, smash mouth back, which is what Jacksonville wants. So Jacksonville runs for less than 50 yards with Yeldon and an offensive line.
They had a 4th and 1 with a game kind of on the line.
Exactly, and you got a bear like Ivory. It's obviously a different. They're in the game. They play a very good football game. They throw for more yards. I mean, you're looking at a team. The Green Bay Packers struggled to win. They did win. Now Aaron Rodgers made some great plays. Guys draped on his back, still putting that thing in there. But they beat Jacksonville on the road. They go from 6 to 1. Now you take the Patriots, who go to Arizona, who everybody is talking about Arizona being able to battle for the NFC, possibly the best team in the NFC, with no Brady, no Gronk, no Ninkovich, 2 offensive line starters not playing. They go on the road and they win. And by the way, they controlled the game. If you watch the game, they controlled the game the whole way. They played good football, 62% on 3rd down conversion. 62. 45 is a game. I mean, you are balling. You can't be more happy with that. 62%. And I talked about in this game, if you watch the control, and I understand Arizona has a chance to win late and they miss a field goal and all that, but Garoppolo, with it on the line, drives it down to be able to kick the field goal. Everything they had to do, they did. And you look at Arizona's defense, very good defense. Chandler Jones over there, Matthews over there. You have Calais Campbell. You have all these players everybody's talking about, and they are able to control.
Honey Badger.
Yeah. So they have all these guys who can play good football, and the Patriots win. How are they not 1? It's shocking to me that you would go from 6 to 1, and the Patriots can't get into that 1.
You can make a hell of an argument for the Patriots. You just did, Jeff Saturday, obviously. But I would say that if something holds them back, it's that Bill Belichick's unbeatable first week. Let's say 12-1 in his last 13 first week, because he has all that extra time to prepare. He can do it with Garoppolo. He can do it with Matt Castle. He can do, if you give him time to prepare.
He did with Matt Castle 11-5. That's not one game.
No, right. No, sure. If you give Belichick time to prepare, and also he doesn't have guys on the roster just because. It's because he can do what they need him to do. So you can make a very good case for the Patriots. They should be #1. But let me tell you what I saw from Green Bay. I saw the team I thought Seattle was going to be. And I know Seattle had a very tough Miami defense that's now a little banged up, but this was the Miami defense everyone was maybe expecting to see last year, signing Ndamukong Suh, and they were very tough. Seattle still got the win, but their offensive line deficiencies were glaring in that game, I felt. And then you look at Green Bay against a much improved Jacksonville team on the road, And what did you see? They have a good offensive line. They got a defense. They have the best quarterback in the game who's back doing things that no one else can do.
Jordy Nelson's back.
Jordy Nelson's back, although maybe not looking like exact, but still. But we saw Aaron Rodgers at the end of the end of the first half of that game. He's scrambling. He throws a bullet down the field, to take the lead going into the hat. And just like you watch the way that played, but it says no one else can really do that. So they have the best quarterback in the game, a really well-rounded team, the complement of receivers back. I get it. I get why. Against a Jacksonville team, let's see what happens this year. They look pretty good.
They did look
pretty good to me. I get why Green Bay would be one. Seattle's the one that takes the tumble to me here, because coming into the season, I thought they should be number one, and they've been correctly demoted.
The one thing about the Jacksonville, and I agree with you, I think this team has a chance to battle in the AFC South for a possible division. I get that they are definitely a much better football team, and with Chris Ivory, who's out of the hospital now, this will be even a better football team. They don't know how to win yet. So winning a tight game against Jacksonville in Jacksonville doesn't say as much to me about how good Green Bay is, as opposed to New England beating a good team at home in the whole
one of the odds-on favorites, Arizona.
I mean, that's a much tougher win for me, and in my opinion, than going to Jacksonville against a very good team, but young guys who don't know how to quite get over the top.
Is that Belichick with preparation? See what I mean? Like, is that going to show up all season, or is that game one because Belichick got time to prepare for these guys?
I think that continues to show up. I think if you look at the way they play, they were so commanding. That's the part that shocked me. It wasn't a shock as a tight game, but 62% conversion rate on third down, being able to run the ball over 100 yards, two offensive linemen gone,
Lewis
and Gronk. Gronk's not there. I mean, you're talking about, and Blunt, other than the fumble, he played a good football game. Everything you had there, it's tough for me to see how you wouldn't put the Patriots at one. As good as Green Bay is, and I agree with you, they're a good football team. They'll be competing for it. It's kind of a slap in the face, in my opinion, of the Patriots. And that's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to say.
Are y'all finished? I don't want to hear anything about Green Bay. They barely beat Jacksonville. I'm not saying they're not a good team. You know how I feel about Aaron Rodgers. I think that he's the baddest man on the planet as far as I'm concerned. But they struggled with Jacksonville. They ain't getting number one in my power rankings. Let me turn to you. I respect the New England Patriots. I think Bill Belichick's the best in the game. The fact that you don't have Gronk and Brady and you still beat Arizona was incredibly impressive until you dig deeper and you listen to the things that they say. And was it a product of New England, or was it a product of Arizona not being ready? When you've got the coach and you've got the GM, literally Bruce Arians went into the locker room and called out players by name, according to the report. You got Honey Badger back there after getting hurt last season. Peterson and those guys could have stepped up. Chandler Jones and those boys celebrating just because they down 10-0 and celebrating, not having their heads in the game. Offensively, they just seemed ill-prepared for the contest. I'm not saying that the Patriots don't deserve credit. But when we talk about number one in the power rankings, far be it for me to bring this team up, but they would happen to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Has anybody noticed what happened? I mean, the Redskins are the NFC East champions. The Redskins does have a quarterback in Kirk Cousins who's in a contract year, franchise tag, $19.95 million. Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson, both entering the final years of their contracts with a lot to prove. Jordan Reed, we all acknowledge, a flat-out stud. You got Josh Norman, who's supposed to be an elite corner. You got Breland there with them. You got Kerrigan and D'Angelo Hall. And what did we see from the Pittsburgh Steelers? No Martavis Bryant, no Marcus Wheaton, Heath Miller retired, no Ladarius Green, okay? They had to walk out onto the field, no Le'Veon Bell, okay? So they walked onto the field with Antonio Brown, no doubt, with Sammy Coates, okay? With some dude, Eli Rogers, okay? With a 33-year-old running back in D'Angelo Williams.
They weren't playing anybody.
Hold on.
Yeah,
Wait a minute.
Washington's a good team. They weren't playing it. Jacksonville's a better team than Washington right now.
Stop right there. First of all, you don't know that.
No, I'm predicting it.
You predict, so am I, but you don't know.
Right.
I didn't say you didn't. I didn't say what you predicted. I said you don't know. So what I'm trying to say to you is this, Max Kellerman. What we have to go on is the fact that the Steelers we're depleted, and that was just on offense. I didn't bring up the absence of Bud Dupree. I didn't bring up what Jarvis Jones had to prove. I didn't bring up what the Steelers secondary had to prove. And so what I'm saying to you is this, only for week 1. Remember, power rankings are week to week, Max. I don't know if you knew that, but I'm telling you right now, it's week to week, Max. We only talk about this week. We're not talking about next week. We're not talking about a month.
You know why you're so impressed?
We're talking
because you thought Washington was going to win that game. I told you Pittsburgh was going to win. I told you Pittsburgh was going to win the game.
You did, but let me tell you why. I'm a Steelers fan, hardcore, and I predicted they would 12 wins this year. My position was if they're going to lose a game, it would be the first game of the season while they're trying to get themselves together on the road with the bevy of injuries. Because remember, we found out Marcus Wheaton wasn't going to play. We found out Ladarius Green was going to play. If they were going to play, I would have picked them. My point is that I'm thinking you're going to win 12 games, you're going to lose 4. This might be one of the 4. That's all mere bag of shells.
Why did they win? Tell me why they won.
They won because their offense, led by Big Ben with Antonio Brown.
And the O-line.
And the O-line. That's what I'm waiting for.
Listen.
Build it.
It's very
D'Angelo Williams good, but he ain't that good. That's the O-line.
It's very rare that you see reporters sitting up there vibing with the offensive line. I had the pleasure of talking to the Steelers offensive line after the game. It was a beautiful moment. You understand what I'm saying? It was a beautiful moment. That's right. That's right. I'm sitting there talking to the offensive line.
Because they balled.
They flat out balled.
And
Pouncey being back, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Castro getting his money, that's a beautiful thing. I'm simply saying, for week 1, based on all the performances, to me, the Steelers would be number 1 in the power rankings. That's all. I said
because you overrate Washington. That's why.
Listen, the Steelers, I love them, and I love them in the AFC. In fact, Ben is my MVP. He's my predicted MVP. So I don't disagree with you on this about how good. New England beat a better team on the road than Pittsburgh beat a team on the road. So if you're comparing the two, however you take it, but both depleted, both playing, New England still went into a better, in a more hostile environment, a better team, and they won. Pittsburgh does the same thing. Washington is not as good as Arizona.
And by the way, they didn't have their quarterback. I mean, the Patriots didn't have their quarterback.
Belichick, baby.
Washington definitely is not as good
as
Arizona, no doubt about it. But again, I emphasized what Bruce Arians and the GM said about their players. And I'm saying to you, this opening week, you have to take into consideration when guys walk in there and they just ain't ready to go.
They don't play.
Are you evening this up, or do you agree with us?
I'm staying out of it.
What?
I'm staying out of it.
Thank you.
I'm staying out of it.
I appreciate that.
She didn't want to salt the wound. You got hurt early this morning. We're going to
please. You know what? He got, listen.
He like, Stephen A. got
We're just getting started.
I'm a man. I got to do this.
Oh, boy.
Max Kellerman got me. My argument was there's no way in hell Randy Johnson would intentionally walk Barry Bonds. He did it twice.
And by the way,
it's not the Glavin Maddox thing, Smoltz thing. I thought Randy Johnson, the only 2 people who never walked Barry Bonds was Nolan Ryan and Dennis Eckersley. You got me.
Well, now
you got me.
And by the way,
I'm a man.
And by the way,
I gotta own up. I gotta own up.
The point was Randy Johnson didn't want to walk him, but when the manager tells you to walk him, you got to do it. What are you going to do?
Got to do it.
Antonio Brown blitzed the Redskins defense for 126 receiving yards and 2 TDs on Monday Night Football, while Odell Beckham Jr. is preparing to play a Saints team this weekend that he lit up for 130 yards, and 3 TDs. That would be last season. Jeff Saturday still here with us.
You know it.
You know what, Jeff? I'm going to wait on you here, though. You're going to be the tiebreaker in this one because I have a feeling this is going to be an intense conversation.
Like this.
Max, let's start with you. Who got it right now, Brown or Beckham?
The answer is Odell Beckham Jr. And I realize that's not going to be a popular pick, and yes, I am a Giants fan, though this is the first time I've ever argued that a Giants player was the best at anything since Lawrence Taylor was around. Since game 1 of his career, we missed the first 4 weeks. Since game 1 of his career, we've been living in the Odell Beckham Jr. era, just not everyone's aware of it. But you know what? On a deeper level, people are aware of it. That's why every time there's a popularity poll, a poll of who's the most well-known player, who sells the most jerseys, everyone else's name changes, but you know who's always up in the mix, way up by the top? Odell Beckham Jr., that ESPN poll, 100 most famous athletes in the world. It was of football, when the NFL, because a lot of soccer players, basketball players, number 1 was Cam, then Peyton, and right behind Peyton was Odell Beckham Jr., because fans know and others know that they're looking at something different. Even in this era, that favors the pass, that favors the receiver, the quarterback, even in this era, with guys like not just Antonio Brown, who's putting up the most impressive numbers at the moment, for the most part, but also Julio Jones and Des Bryant and A.J. Green and so many others. Odell Beckham is different. When you watch him, if you're honest with yourself, you know you're watching something different, which is why he's actually underrated, because people say, especially other football players love to talk about this, other receivers too, oh yeah, because of that one-handed catch. That one-handed catch is the worst thing that could have happened for his football reputation, because people like to harp on that and pretend that's the reason that he's quote-unquote overrated. Antonio Brown, when you line up since Odell's first game, remember he was suspended a game for the Josh Norman game. If you start from their first game, Antonio Brown's got 20 touchdowns. He's a beast. Odell's got 25. Now, Antonio Brown has an edge in receptions and yards. Not a tremendous edge, but he has an edge. 5 fewer touchdowns, but an edge there. But let me ask you something. Stephen A. Smith, may I call you to the witness stand?
Sure, I'm listening.
Jeff Saturday. Is there even a comparison between the Giants O-line and the Pittsburgh O-line?
No.
There's not even a comparison. Pittsburgh has the best, or one of the 2 or 3 best, and the Giants, their O-line has been an eyesore. It's been a major problem. They're hoping they can get it together. Do the Giants have a running back like D'Angelo Williams even, running behind that line? No, of course, obviously. But anything like Le'Veon Bell,
Certainly not.
when he's on the field, it's not even...
When he's on the field. That's funny.
Well,
That's
the Giants can put whoever they want on the field. I'll take Le'Veon Bell for as many games as he plays over anyone the Giants have.
That's not good.
Do the Giants have a second receiver, if Cruz has not gotten on the field, that compares to Martavis Bryant? I know he's suspended this year, but he's been on the field. Like, offensively, and Stephen A., who has a better quarterback? Who's better, Ben Roethlisberger or Eli Manning? Didn't you both just say Ben Roethlisberger is your MVP? Wasn't I just sitting here a minute ago when you both said Ben Roethlisberger is your MVP? So playing behind a night and day better offensive line, with way better offensive players on the field, with a quarterback that you both sit here and say should be the MVP this year, and you're making fun of Eli throwing interceptions, the statistical comparison is close. Odell has an enormous advantage in touchdowns when you look at a percentage of the plays. Odell is younger, he's bigger, he's more talented, and everyone can harp on Antonio Brown's work ethic, and he deserves it. Antonio Brown is having a 3-year stretch that's like unlike any. It's ridiculous. I love Antonio Brown, and I'm glad that finally the world has caught up to my way of thinking over the last several years, which is it's Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham.
I appreciate you trying to make my argument for me, but go ahead.
Love you, Julio Jones. Love you, Des Bryant. Love you, A.J. Green. But this world is Antonio Brown versus Odell Beckham. And I am here to tell you, if you have the choice of one or the other, it's Odell. And if you doubt it, switch teams. Put Antonio Brown on the Giants. Put Odell on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Would it even be close?
Actually,
I rest my case.
Actually, it would be, and Antonio Brown would win right now. Let's be clear about something here. We're talking about an Odell Beckham Jr. who's a first-round pick for the New York Giants against an Antonio Brown who was drafted 195th overall, a 6th rounder, okay? You had to adjust to a particular system. We are talking about the last 3 years in which Antonio Brown has performed. In 2011, he had 1,108 yards. The very next year he got hurt. He was en route to another 1,000-yard season, but he got hurt and missed about 3 games. So let's take that into consideration. And then ever since then, when we say he had a 1,400-yard season, let's be clear, it was 1,499. That's a 1,500-yard season. The following year was 1,698, which is 1,700. And then last year, it was 1,834. And we saw what he did Monday night. His route running, keep in mind that he also played special teams, so he would return, he would catch punts, punt returns, kickoff returns, all of that other stuff. This dude was a dual threat, just phenomenal in every sense of the word. We also have to take into account of Big Ben Roethlisberger, that even when he has played, he has been injured because of the pounding he has taken. Let's take that into consideration. Where Eli Manning, Mr. Reliable, having missed a game in a decade, obviously everything evolves around him. And even though the Giants' offensive line was suspect, it was particularly more so against the run than it was against the pass. Because one of the things that quickly got running backs in Tom Coughlin's doghouse was their inability to block, because he usually left them back for pass protection to ensure that Eli Manning would be able to throw the football.
They have no line.
Wait a minute. I just explained that. I'm sorry, you need to regurgitate that comment? I thought I just said that. That's why you bring people back to help. All I'm trying to say is that whatever help you needed, You kept help back there to make sure Eli could throw the football. So if Eli has been throwing the football, nobody's taking anything away from the greatness of Odell Beckham Jr. We know it's legit. We know it's big time. But at the end of the day, because we're talking about the sport of football here, unlike any other sport, you cannot minimize availability, continuity, and consistency. You can't do that. You can't dismiss that like you could dismiss it in other sports. The fact that Antonio Brown is 3 years and counting doing what he does is enough to disqualify Odell Beckham Jr. until he continues to do it. And by the way,
Always
when you sit up there, hold on, wait a minute. By the way, this is very important.
Career reward from Stephen A. Smith as usual.
By the way,
right now.
No, we are having it right now. Antonio Brown, you didn't just see him Monday night?
Yeah,
You haven't seen
behind
the
that line with Ben Roethlisberger, I did. Single cover a lot of
but
times.
here's
Yeah,
the deal.
I did.
But here's the deal also. When we also talk about this, let's take this into consideration too. When you look at Antonio Brown, you talked about Julio Jones. Let's just dismiss him. I'm sorry. The only reason you could dismiss Julio Jones from this conversation is because of Matt Ryan. You can't dismiss Julio Jones because of Julio Jones.
I love Julio Jones.
You cannot dismiss. There is nothing. Julio Jones is fresh off an 1,800
AJ
yards.
Green too.
You cannot dismiss Julio Jones from the conversation just because of Matt Ryan.
What I'm saying is that Odell Beckham in this look, there was a Jerry Rice era. You know, respects to Michael Irvin, but it was a Jerry Rice era. And I know T.O. could do more things than Randy Moss, but I'm sorry. You know it when you see it. Moss was different. And then there was Calvin Johnson, and there was a year where Andre Johnson was doing all these things, and he had proven it. You can't give it to Calvin yet. I'm sorry. If you watched Calvin Johnson, you're like, that's the guy. And what I'm telling you now is this. We are living in Odell Beckham Jr.'s era. When you put your eyeballs on that guy, you know it. And
He's
when you dig into the
electrifying.
numbers,
Don't make him better.
when you isolate the value of the player
Don't
and
make
take
him
him
better,
off
Max.
the team, I see the
Okay.
value of the
Okay.
player.
Right.
It's Odell
Don't make him
Beckham
better.
Jr.
Team Beckham, Team Brown, Jeff Saturday, break this tie for us.
All right, here's my thing. You went to O-line, so I'm going to jump on the O-line. O-line last year for Pittsburgh did not play well. Guys were banged up. They were injured.
That is correct.
They played average ball at best. Big Ben took some thumpings and some nasty shots. He played banged up half the year. Again, you want to go to touchdowns. I'm going to go your touchdowns first, right? Brown had to share touchdowns with Bryant, with Le'Veon Bell, right? So he had to do more sharing than Odell had to do last year, right? Everybody knows it's going to be Odell. Everybody knows he's going to get more shots at it because he doesn't have to disperse the ball. Eli doesn't have to disperse the ball the same way as Big Ben does. Everybody's got to get touches, right? Everybody's got to be happy. That's what skill players do. You went to popularity. Right? Popularity comes from spectacular catches, and Odell has made spectacular catches. That does not mean that is the best player at the position. The best player at the position right now is Antonio Brown. And I'll tell you why. You want to take a short glimpse. Last week, Odell played the Cowboys. How good is the Cowboys secondary? Not
very.
Okay, compare that to the Redskins secondary. I know where everybody's torching Breland right now because of what he did. He's a good cover corner.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to tell
Josh
people,
Norman, good corner, right? D'Angelo Hall, good safety. So from as far as what Antonio Brown, no Bryant, no Bell, no Heath Miller. We got a new slot in Eli Rogers, coaches in the game. Everybody knows the ball is going to go to Antonio Brown.
Can I please address that?
And he gets the ball.
Can I please address that?
And makes plays.
Can I please address that as you're going?
Address it.
What you said is right about Antonio Brown last week. That's why he's one of the greatest who ever did it. He's just amazing.
He is amazing.
What you just said about what applied to Antonio Brown last week applies to Odell Beckham Jr. every single week of his career. And the stats are close.
But you gave the touchdowns. You said the touchdowns in
But what I'm saying is you
because
made all these excuses for Antonio Brown. I'm saying those excuses apply to Odell Beckham in every game he's ever played.
Without Bryant and without Bell, Brown would have more touchdowns. Because he's going to get fed more. It's just a natural tendency of the game to get it.
Okay, so if you want to do
Brown
that,
on the Giants, he would have the same numbers as Odell, if not better.
So what you're arguing
That's what I'm saying.
Better.
This is the question. This is the question.
And both are great. Both are great.
This is the question.
But that's the deal.
So this is basically what if you switch teams, who puts up better numbers?
Brown.
Brown puts up better numbers on the Giants than Odell does on the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yes. Yeah, because you got to share the ball on the Steelers. You're going to have to share it. Listen, Coates is going to end up getting balls this year. Rodgers is going to get balls
But you
this year.
just made the
Bell
argument.
Is going to get, I'm saying if
you
Odell
just made the argument that without all those other guys, it was tougher on Antonio Brown. Now you're turning around and saying it'd be easier.
If Odell goes over, I'm talking about specifically just touchdowns. Just touchdowns alone, because that was the number that you used. You said he's got 5 more touchdowns.
Eli spreads the ball around.
Not for touchdowns.
Yes, he does.
Not
As a matter
for
of fact,
touchdowns.
As a matter of fact, he
Otherwise,
missed Odell.
Odell wouldn't have as many touchdowns as he does.
He missed Odell in the end zone. Eli did this week. The next pass went to Victor Cruz.
All right. Will the new guy, will Sterling have more touchdowns? How much will it affect Odell's touchdowns this year with having the new two?
I think it will affect.
It will. It'll bring it down, right?
Maybe.
Not because Odell's not the same player, not because he's not, in fact, better than he was last year, because Eli will share the ball, coverage will roll, that opening will be there. So that will happen.
If Shepard,
it's the same way.
This is what I'm saying. If Shepard can ball, Odell's numbers generally will get better, not worse. He will face every resource.
His touchdowns will go down.
But his overall numbers will be better than Antonio Brown if Shepard can ball. By the way, if he had Ben Roethlisberger throwing the ball behind that line, there'd be no question.
Listen, Eli's not a slouch.
Yeah,
don't go. Listen,
I love Eli Manning.
I do too. So it's not. We're not talking about a scrub.
You just said Ben was going to be the MVP.
He is my MVP. But I'm saying Eli is still a very capable quarterback. So it's not like you're going trash against a good one. They still both got good ones. I'm telling you, if you switch teams, Brown still has better numbers.
We disagree about that, but the argument seems to be that because Brown has more weapons, a better offensive line, and a better quarterback, according to you guys, his numbers shouldn't be as good because it has to spread it around. But when you take away those weapons from Brown, he deserves even more credit for putting up the numbers. And what I'm saying is Eli has all those weapons taken away basically on a weekly basis and still produces basically Antonio Brown numbers. They're very close. In fact, when you look at all different kinds of coverage, it's really close. But he has more touchdowns, but somehow for Eli that doesn't.
Kinds of coverage. The numbers are not there.
For Beckham, it doesn't count. How do you figure?
The numbers are not there. Antonio Brown had almost 400 yards more than Odell Beckham Jr. last year, and not to mention at least 30 more receptions.
I'm talking about against non-single coverage. Their numbers are extremely close. 26 out of 44, 24 out of 38. It's very close. In fact, Odell Beckham is targeted a little less and catches it at a slightly higher percentage.
You took your first loss of the day. Just chalk it up. Chalk it up.
This debate is so good.
I know it's hard.
The great thing is we're comparing two great players. That's the reality.
Listen, those kind of debates are what makes this show so fun.
I know he's hard-headed. It's all right. It's okay. It's all right. I'm here for you.
Of course you think you won.
It's still not over, though, because we want you guys to still weigh in. Who would you rather have, Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham? Go on our First Take Twitter page, vote right now. Maybe it sways back towards Mr. Kellerman. Jeff, thank you so much for being with us.
Had a blast.
Always fun. After the break, we've heard from just about everyone regarding the national anthem protests, and now Jerry Jones is weighing in on his weekly radio appearance on 105.3 The Fan in Dallas yesterday, saying he is very disappointed. Here's more.
The forum of the NFL and the forum on television is a very significant thing. I'm for it being used in every way we can to support the great contributors in our society, and that's people that have supported America, the flag, and there's no reason not to go all out right there. And for anybody to use parts of that visibility to do otherwise is really disappointing.
Jerry is very disappointed, Max. Do you have a problem with his comments?
Yes, I do. I have a big problem with his comments. Of course, Jerry Jones, Stephen A., is disappointed by this. Of course he doesn't like this. He wants to focus on what's great about our country. Of course he does. Know why? He owns a football team. He gets to own the Dallas Cowboys. He's a rich, old white guy who gets to own the Dallas Cowboys. How many African-American team owners are there in the NFL?
Zero.
Zero. Now, is this because in a country with a relatively large African-American population, is this because somehow African-Americans are intrinsically worse at business? Is this the reason? Is it because that there's not a lot of African-American participation or interest in the NFL? No? Okay. In that case, the inequity here is the result of hundreds of years of systematic oppression, starting with the country's original sin, which has not been fully remedied. It's been largely remedied compared to where it once was, but has not been fully remedied, which can be seen in discrepancies along racial lines, in income, in levels of education, opportunity, etc. So naturally, Jerry Jones says, let's focus on what's great about America. Look how great America is. Well, others may say, wait a minute, we're not there yet. America may be great, but there are things that can be improved, and let's focus on the things that need to be improved. Why is that disappointing to him? I think it's a great thing about our country. The idea that that Kaepernick is using, and others are now using the NFL to make their point. When you play, and others have made this point in recent weeks, when you play, do you decide to have a ceremony involving the national anthem in the football game? The two don't have to be married, but they are together now. You are the one who has entered, potentially, politics into the equation. Not Kaepernick. Kaepernick didn't decide, hey, I'll tell you what, let's play the national anthem so I can take a knee and disappoint Jerry Jones. No. He's not the originator of the kind of injection of politics or patriotism or nationalism, more appropriately, into the NFL. Others are. He's choosing not to participate, which, of course, disappoints those who benefit from the status quo, like Jerry Jones. In that sense, it's extremely tone-deaf, I don't think well thought out, and I do have a problem with it.
You should have a problem with it. But forgive me if I'm smiling. Because, you see, I like that Jerry Jones said what he said. Because I'm a bit more cynical. Yet I try to be somebody who thinks these things through as opposed to just react emotionally, even though the emotional reactions are entirely justified. Let's take, for example, Jerry Jones and what he had to say. He is a white individual who is a billionaire, one of 32 NFL owners, okay? When we look at the NFL, Max Kellerman, we have to come to the conclusion that we've got about 19 of the 32 owners, according to my research, have net worth over $1 billion. Do you know how many black people in this country have over $1 billion? So far as we know, 3. Oprah Winfrey, Robert Smith, who's the CEO of the investment firm Vista Equity Partners, and, of course, the great Michael Jordan. Oprah Winfrey's at $3.2 billion. She leads the pack. That's as far as we know. If I've missed any, if I've missed anything, I apologize. But that's according to the list of research that I've done. I was thinking Robert Johnson used to own BET as well, but I remember there was a divorce settlement, and I think somebody got half. But that's a different subject for another day. Here's the reality of the situation. When Jerry Jones opened his mouth, he's speaking about white privilege, and he's obviously detached from the trials and tribulations that a lot of people, particularly those of African-American descent, have experienced in this country. Here's the thing. He's not alone. Jerry Jones is from, he's in Texas and went to school in Arkansas. You understand? I mean, down in those parts, we sort of understand how some people from an historical perspective have a particular view that may not coincide with that of myself.
Or civilized humanity.
That's right.
Go ahead.
Well, but Boomer Esiason had some things to say. Our very own Trent Dilfer on Sunday's show had some things to say. John Tortorella had something to say as well. I didn't agree with anything. As I told Trent Dilfer during Monday Night Football, and I appreciate the conversation that he and I had as colleagues who work here together, and he was incredibly respectful, and there were some things that he didn't understand in terms of how people were coming at him because of how he sounded. And I said, no, you have every right to say what you say. Just understand that we respectfully disagree, and here's why. And that should be that. But it needs to be understood that this is the kind of mentality that justifies what Colin Kaepernick has decided to do and what ultimately he has sparked. Because when we talk about injustice and inequality as it exists in our country, particularly towards African Americans and people of color, we have to recognize there are those who are cynics, there are those who are dismissive, there are those who are ignorant, and then there are those who simply just honestly don't know, can't relate because they've heard these kind of things, but they haven't been exposed to it, they don't know any better, and that is why it justifies what Colin Kaepernick has done. It does not always justify the anger because some people honestly may not know. And it's our job to show them what they don't know, whereas others are insensitive, arbitrarily ignorant to a situation, or just flat out racist in their own right. The point is, you get to find out who they are, how they think, and why. And why be upset about that when it's basically the darkness coming to the light? And we're seeing the real divide that exists where people have walked around talking about civil rights legislation is passed, affirmative action is in place. So many things in our society has gotten so much better. What the hell is there to complain about? And then you see a Jerry Jones, and you hear these comments from others, and you say, here's what there is to complain about. You see what we were saying? It all makes sense.
I just want to say, because this is coming up a lot about the Kaepernick topic, I don't blame or hold against anyone who wants to stand for the national anthem, including I stand for the national anthem, because you want to focus on what's great about the country. I don't think Kaepernick does either. I don't think he has a problem with those who are saying, I'm standing because I'm focusing on what's great about America. I'm patriotic in that way. Not about nationalism, it's about patriotism. Why is it that the other camp is so offended by those who choose to focus on what still needs to be improved rather than what's been done already and what's good? Why is that camp so angry?
Because it makes them uncomfortable. Last point, one of my boys sent me this morning. I had Dave Zabino double-check this for me because I want to double-check these facts, make sure we was on point. Let me read something to y'all real quick. It wasn't until 2009 that until 2009, no NFL player stood for the national anthem because players actually stayed in the locker room as the anthem played. The players were moved to the field during the national anthem because it was seen as a marketing strategy to make the athletes look more patriotic. The United States Department of Defense paid the National Football League $5.4 million.
I've been talking about
$5.4 million between 2011 and 2014, and the National Guard $6.7 million between 2013 and 2015 to stage on-field patriotic ceremonies as part of military recruitment budget line items.
And that's
this is
why
stuff that has been printed.
And there's that.
And then there's that.
That's why Senator McCain co-signed the statement saying, I mean, they looked into it and said this is paid patriotism.
Let's just marinate on that for a second as we go back to football.
Paid patriotism.
I've been talking
Very interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. When we come back, they will be forever linked as the top two quarterbacks taken in the 2015 NFL draft. But is Marcus Mariota even in the same class as Jameis Winston? That discussion coming up.
Listen up. This man came to us last year and took our offense to be the 5th offense in the whole damn NFL. He always getting on my not checking the ball down. I think he's happy, and I think he's really happy that we went out there and we fought for this man, and we got him his first victory.
Even I'm fired up after that. That was Jameis Winston talking to his teammates in the locker room after throwing 4 touchdowns in the Bucs' 31-24 win Week 1 over the Falcons. Marcus Mariota, who was taken with the number 2 pick behind Winston in the 2015 draft, threw for 271 yards, 2 TDs, and 1 interception in the Titans' Week 1 loss to the Vikings. Stephen A., is Mariota even in Winston's league?
Not to me. Not to me. I don't think he is. And I'm not talking about talent per se. I think that Jameis Winston is a superior talent at the quarterback position, but it's not to knock Mariota. He's a relatively quiet, unassuming guy. He works his tail off. Not the greatest evening last week, not the greatest afternoon last weekend, but he's got promise, and I think he'll be a good quarterback for Tennessee. I just think Jameis Winston is a star in the making. I think he's an individual that wants to start him bad. I think Mariota wants to win football games. Jameis wants to be the reason they win football games. He wants it bad, and he is, you could see the insatiable effect that he has on guys around him, galvanizing the troops and getting them to maximize their potential. I look at him as a superior talent to Mariota at the quarterback position, but it's not that big of a deal. But where I say Mariota's not in his class, is Jameis Winston as the kind of leader that I can look at and say, okay, I need everybody around you to give me all they've got because of you. I think that's Jameis Winston. I don't see that in Mariota yet.
If you're asking me who I'd rather have at this moment, this season, I would take Jameis Winston. But are they in the same class? Absolutely. And it's too early to tell who's going to be better. I'm going to start with Winston. I'm going to make the argument for Mariota. Winston's a leader. You can see it. He has leadership qualities. Winston has a big arm. Winston has a better pedigree, national championship, a Heisman Trophy, Rookie of the Year. And Winston's on a better team at the moment with much better receivers. Mariota last year, in spite of Mariota goes and loses to the Vikings, an excellent defense. Winston puts it on Atlanta, a bad defense. Look at last year. Mariota, better completion percentage. He has the better legs. All the other, like when you isolate for quarterback value, which is difficult to do, it is unclear who's better. When you add all the other stuff, the team they're on, who they're playing, what receivers they have, and the way they make you feel in the locker room, you give it to Winston. But it is way too early to say, I think, who's going to have the better career. And I think at this moment, Mariota is certainly in his class.
I think when you're young and you have the kind of leadership that Jameis Winston has, when they've said he is the franchise, it's your second year in the league, your first year in the league, now it's their second year in the league, and they say it's your franchise, and you have that kind of effect on teammates around you, that's exponentially great.
What's not
Listen,
to
when
like
we did the show at Bucks Place, I was so impressed with him when we had him on the show. When we come back, who is the best receiver in the NFL, Odell Beckham or Antonio Brown? This is so good. The results of our Twitter poll after the break.
First Take is brought to you by T-Mobile. Ditch your carrier and switch to the Un-carrier. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. And Corona, who invites you to find your beach.
We've been talking about it all show, and we asked you all at home to vote on this topic. Here are the results. Who would you take, Antonio Brown or Odell Beckham? 76% are with Team Brown and Mr. Stephen A. Smith. 24, that's not that bad.
To be expected. You'll catch on. Don't worry about it. As I said, I remember when everyone thought Andre Johnson was still better than Calvin Johnson, and it wasn't true anymore. That's where we are here. People
You might just be a little late to the party.
Yeah, everyone thinks Roethlisberger's going to be the MVP. They have a great offensive line. They have other weapons. And Odell, what Antonio Brown just did is the only offensive option. Odell does that every week for 2 years now and putting up the same kind of numbers.
I think you're missing the bigger point. The bigger point is that they agree with me. They don't agree with you. It's not a surprise. You're going to have to get over that. That's something you should be used to by now.
If I wasn't able to put people up on stuff, I wouldn't have a job. This is what I'm here to do, is to educate you.
All right. But I will confess, once again, you got me on the walk in a barrier.
Yes.
I cannot believe
Thank
that
you for
Randy
conceding.
Johnson